The Ravens' home opener is at 1 o'clock this Sunday against the Las Vegas Raiders. Both of these teams are coming off of losses handed to them by AFC West opponents. For the Raiders, it was a disappointing start to the season as Jim Harbaugh's new rushing attack via Greg Roman ran them ragged the whole game. For the Ravens, it was a heartbreaking missed opportunity to not only get some payback against the Chiefs, but also to make a statement reminding the rest of the league that the Ravens were the best team in football last year during the regular season. With neither team wanting to start the season on a losing streak, especially Baltimore in its home opener, both will be doing everything they can to leave the field with their first notch in the win column. Let's get to it. Welcome in, everyone. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and today we're going to be previewing the Ravens' Week 2 matchup in Baltimore against the Las Vegas Raiders. As I said in the opening, both of these teams will be attempting to rebound from losses during their first game of the season. But in order to do that, they will need their stars to perform and some of their younger players to take that next step. Let's start by taking a look at some of the Raiders' offensive players that Baltimore fans should be on the lookout for in Sunday's game. We'll begin with the Raiders' starting quarterback Gardner Minshew. Ravens fans will be familiar with Minshew as he led the Colts last year to a 22-19 victory over the Ravens in Week 3. Despite having lost last week, Minshew actually played better against the Chargers than he did versus the Ravens last year, slinging the ball around to multiple receivers who made some big plays. While he might not be Patrick Mahomes, I haven't forgotten our loss to the Colts last year, so I won't be looking past Gardner in this game. But he might be on the lookout for Kyle Hamilton. The Raiders' run game struggled to get going last week with starter Zamir White getting a bulk of the carries. The Ravens did well containing Isaiah Pacheco last week, but they will have to be on the lookout for both White and Alexander Mattison catching passes out of the backfield. Mattison, who had the only touchdown of the game for the Raiders, caught a pass from Minshew, taking it 31 yards down the sideline for the score. The passing game is where I believe the Raiders will be able to do the most damage against the Ravens. Even though Jacoby Myers was the leader in yards last week, Davante Adams, as we all know, is always a threat. Adams has played against the Ravens only twice in his career, most recently in 2021 when he was still with the Green Bay Packers. Again, Minshew is no Aaron Rodgers, but with at least 4 players having receptions of over 20 yards, the Ravens will have to be careful to avoid getting beat deep. Rookie tight end Brock Bowers looked good in his debut with Las Vegas, catching 6 of his 8 targets and being one of the 4 players with a catch over 20 yards. The Ravens did well against Travis Kelce last week, so let's see if they can handle a good rookie on Sunday. Now let's get into the defense of the Raiders, the side of the ball that I know most Ravens fans are more concerned with, and for good reason. Max Crosby was in the running for Defensive Player of the Year last year and came out with that same level of play against the Chargers last week. Between Crosby, Wilkins, and Butler on this defensive line, the Ravens' offensive line is going to have to be a lot more consistent than it was last week. We'll get into this later when I discuss what the Ravens need to do to win this game from an offensive standpoint, but unsurprisingly, keeping Lamar Jackson upright is a major one. Linebacker Robert Spillane led this team last week with double-digit tackles and a tackle for loss, and while the Raiders' secondary wasn't tested as much with the Chargers' rushing attack, there's plenty of reason Lamar will have to be sharp when dishing the ball. If the Ravens' plan is the same as last week, a bunch of short throws near the line of scrimmage, Ravens receivers better prepare themselves to get hit right after they get the ball, because no one in this Raiders secondary is shy when it comes to tackling. Now let's go ahead and move right into the Ravens, starting with the offense and therefore quarterback Lamar Jackson. After breaking yet another NFL record last week, after Lamar had his 14th game of rushing for more than 100 yards with 122. Lamar showed very little signs of rust in his first week, despite not touching the field once in preseason. Although many Ravens fans, myself included, don't necessarily want to see Lamar running the ball 16 times a game, it is hard to argue with the results. And while the passing game was effective for guys like Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely, I think it's going to be crucial getting more pass catchers involved each week for this Ravens offense. I love that Lamar can scramble when he's under pressure, something that happened far too often last week, but I'm hoping that if the line plays better against the Raiders, we'll see less rushing from Lamar and more throws from the pocket. Speaking of rushing, let's talk about the Ravens' 2 main running backs. Let me just cut to the chase here and say I want to see Derrick Henry running the ball at least 20 times in this game. I know the line was bad last week for Henry, but only having 5 or 6 carries in the second half of a game that's not out of reach is not the Ravens' way, and it's certainly not the best way to get the most out of Derrick Henry. As far as Justice Hill, I'm grateful for his pass catching ability, as he was essential on some drives in getting a first down or two. But if you're only bringing Henry in to run and Hill to pass, it's not going to take very long for defenses to pick up on that and use it against the Ravens. As far as the Ravens wide receivers, I'd like to see a little more diversity in the route combinations between Zay and Bateman. Zay is, of course, insanely gifted with his short area quickness and ability to make multiple tacklers miss, but I hope the Ravens haven't forgotten he has respectable downfield speed as well. And as for Bateman, his 38-yard reception was a thing of beauty, and also just what the doctor ordered when it comes to the connection and trust between him and Lamar Jackson. But Bateman is probably the Ravens' best pure route runner, and his ability over the middle of the field on slants and crossers should be used as much as his ability to go down the field. Now, what can we say about the Ravens' tight ends? Well, for starters, I think the Chiefs were as surprised by the dominating display put on by Isaiah Likely as many Ravens fans were in the lack of usage of Mark Andrews. I said in my post-game livestream that in some games we may see more Isaiah and less Mark, and in others, just the opposite. But before the season started, I felt it was crucial for the Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken to find a way of getting both Andrews and Likely involved more evenly in games. I don't know if this game will be that game, but just like I said with Lamar running the ball 16 times for 122 yards, if Likely goes for 111 yards on 9 receptions and a touchdown, I can't really argue with the results. Unless, of course, he gets the toe down, then it's 2 touchdowns. But we're moving on to the Baltimore Ravens defense. The Ravens defense sacked Patrick Mahomes twice and pressured him more than a few times as well. But I'm looking forward to seeing more out of Nnamdi Madubuike in this game. With Kyle Van Noy most likely out a while with his fractured orbital bone, the other outside linebackers will need additional help getting to the quarterback, and that's where Madubuike comes in. I don't need him to have 2 or 3 sacks in this game, though I wouldn't complain. All I need for him to do, or Travis Jones for that matter, is to push Minshew into the waiting arms of Odafe Oweh and David Ojabo. And while we're on the topic of linebackers, let's talk about David Ojabo and both of our starting inside linebackers. I was glad to see Ojabo get his first sack of the season against Kansas City, but for me, the jury is still out until I see his production and health continue to stay steady. As for Roquan Smith and Trenton Simpson, all I have to say is that Roquan picking off Mahomes was awesome to see, and we need Simpson out there for every snap of the game, especially in coverage. Now, don't get me wrong, I have always been a fan of what Malik Harrison brings to this team, but we have to be honest about exactly what he brings to this team. I want him on the outside, setting the edge, and I want Trenton Simpson, our freak of nature linebacker, covering the middle of the field. Now let's get into the secondary. As I stated when talking about the Raiders' wide receivers, we need to be aware of the big play. Brandon Stephens saw 0 targets last week against the Chiefs, and the last time the Ravens saw Davante Adams, Stephens saw 2 targets and 0 completions. Now, am I saying that Brandon Stephens one-on-one against Davante Adams is going to be an advantageous situation for the Ravens? Absolutely not. I don't think very many corners would want to play Adams one-on-one the whole game. But with the level of physicality that Stephens plays with, along with Marlon Humphrey and Kyle Hamilton, the timing and route execution between Minshew and these receivers is something I think Stephens and the Ravens can have a big impact on. And speaking of impact, we didn't see too much from Kyle Hamilton in the Chiefs game, but as I touched on earlier, that's probably how Gardner Minshew wants this game to go as well. I doubt that Kyle will have 3 sacks in this game like he did against the Colts last year, but I'm predicting a big play, quite possibly a game-breaking play, from the Ravens' all-pro safety on Sunday. Going over the stars of the game is always fun, talking about their big stats, their big impact, and how they can take over a game. But I also want to talk about what I'll call wildcard players. Football is a team game, and if one of the 11 players fail, the whole team can fail. For the Ravens, one of the major talking points and concerns for this season is the newly rebuilt offensive line, and as we saw against the Chiefs, there is reason for concern. For the Ravens, my wildcard player on offense is Daniel Faalele. No, I don't mean to say that he is a wildcard because I expect him to perform poorly. He's a wildcard because if he plays really well, as he did towards the end of the game last week, it could be huge for this Ravens offense. For the Raiders offense, the wildcard I chose is wide receiver Trey Tucker. I discussed a few times earlier how the Raiders succeeded in creating big plays against the Chargers during Week 1, and while Tucker didn't have a 20-plus yard reception last week, he could this Sunday. I say that because of Xavier Worthy's second touchdown last week. I've said before that I believe Marlon Humphrey will have a great season this year, but communication is still essential. Kyle Hamilton has come out and admitted to being at fault for not being where he was supposed to be on that play, but it doesn't require Worthy's insane speed to take advantage of a busted coverage. On defense for the Ravens, my wildcard player is outside linebacker Odafe Owe. With Kyle Van Noy out for this game, the responsibilities of pass rush are going to mainly fall on Owe and Ojabo. We know that Odafe has the skill set and athleticism to be an elite pass rusher in this league, but getting into the backfield and sacking the quarterback are two different things, and so far, Odafe has only really been able to consistently do the first one. For the Raiders on defense, my wild card is defensive tackle John Jenkins. With Jenkins being one of the most veteran players in the league at his position, his ability to disrupt and expose the Ravens' so far underwhelming offensive line could be a key component for this Raiders team. Just like I said with Nnamdi Madubuike, Jenkins doesn't even have to have a single sack in this game to play a big part. If he can simply clog up the running lanes or consistently force Lamar out of the pocket to a player like Max Crosby, it's going to be another long day for this Ravens offense. So now comes the question of, how do the Ravens beat the Raiders? Well, on offense, I think it comes down to these main 4 points. If Lamar can throw from a stable platform and has more confidence that he's stepping up into a secure pocket when taking shots down the field, that's going to go a long way for his offense and the confidence of the offensive line. Along the same line, no pun intended, Henry was effective last week when he had good blocking in front of him. With Lamar saying he was a bit sore after the game, I'm hoping the coaches will make better use of Derrick Henry on Sunday. He should at least see more snaps than Justice Hill in this game. While Lamar and Bateman were able to connect on that 38-yarder at a crucial time in the game, I hope they don't wait until the fourth quarter of this game to do it again. I know that Lamar missed a few times earlier in the game, but we need to keep taking shots and hitting on some of them to back defenses out of the box and give Henry and Lamar room to operate. Outside of Zay Unlikely, no other receiver saw more than 5 targets in last week's game. 1 to Nelson Aguilar, 2 to Mark Andrews, and 5 to Rashad Bateman. If we can't spread the ball around and give defenses a reason to respect each one of our pass catchers, they're just going to double the 2 guys we throw to each week and make Lamar beat them with his legs. We need to get other guys going and mix up the target shares to balance this passing attack to get the most out of it. Now, let's move on to how the Ravens can beat the Raiders on defense. We need to get Minshew on the ground or at least out of the pocket. If we give him time to throw to a guy like Devontae Adams all game, I don't care if it is Gardner Minshew. He's a starting quarterback in this league and he's going to tear us apart. We saw the Chargers make the Raiders' run game irrelevant last week, and so we need to try to do the same thing on Sunday. This also ties back into getting pressure on Minshew, because if they can't run on us, he's going to have to sit back there and throw to beat us, giving our pass rushers more opportunities to make a play. For the 3rd or 4th time in this video, I am bringing up the deep ball. The Ravens were excellent at keeping plays in front of them last year and still seem to have that ability this year. But as we saw with Xavier Worthy, if teams can go deep on us, it's going to be difficult getting pressure on the quarterback. Now, screens aren't as big of a concern to me with guys like Hamilton and Simpson on the defense, but they are many teams' go-to play if running the ball and deep shots aren't working. If the Ravens keep everything in front of them and make tackles when they need to, I think they could find themselves getting off the field more often than not after 3rd downs. Now, even if my score prediction from last week was incorrect, that's not going to stop me from doing another one. For Sunday's game, I have the Ravens winning convincingly in a 35-13 blowout and getting them in the win column for the Ravens faithful at the bank. I would love to hear score predictions from all of you guys, both Ravens fans and Raiders fans alike. So, if you have a guess, pop it down in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this preview video, give it a like, and if you're new around here, subscribe. I look forward to seeing you all after the game for my post-game live stream happening right after the game is over. And as always, guys, stay safe out there and go Ravens.